I would like to welcome a special guest today, Mr. Mahir Gazdar, an experienced English teacher with over 10 years of teaching experience, experienced in Arabic translation, coaching, mentoring, research, academic and creative writing, web development, and more. In addition to that, Mr. Mahir is an acclaimed author of several books. I would like to welcome Mr. Mahir today for this special episode of the Lighthouse. Mr. Mahir, would you be kind to share with us the idea of your books and especially the latest book and how you came up with the idea of these books?
Okay, thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you so much. Okay, well, there are quite a range. Like there's both academic and non-academic. So it actually started off a long time ago. I had a suggestion. Some of my friends were saying like, I write such long emails. This is before WhatsApp and all those things when I was doing my undergraduate, that maybe I should be an author. It was just a joke. But then I thought, maybe what if I could actually write something? So I had a try. I wrote my first book, Ancient Mediterranean Merchant, when I was 20 years old doing my undergraduate. But due to various personal circumstances and other problems that occurred, I did not feel confident enough. So I did not actually continue with that. Many years later, it's actually 10 years later when I was 30 years old, then there was a time my wife, who enjoys reading, she saw my book. I showed her that, and she encouraged me to show other people to write more. So then I went back into it. So I published it. Then I wrote another fictional book, which was Alberto Qalisco, historic fiction. But then I started moving on to other things. Yeah. So I did, like, for example, various books. When I was in Rafah, I've taught all over Saudi Arabia. So I taught in Riyadh, different areas. I've taught in Rafah, which is on the Iraqi border, in Baha, which is in the south near Yemen, in Buraida, which is in the center of the country, in Medina in the west, in Sakaka, which is near Jordan, in Khobar, which is on the Bahraini border. So I've been all over the country. So one of my friends, he suggested maybe I could write a book about those experiences. And sometimes people ask me about it. Yeah. So I started writing those. Yeah. And I made a series of books on that. Then the other thing I did was based on that. I also made some short stories and other things. So I made my website where I have some of those. I translated a couple of books. I was an Arabic translator in the UK, for example. So I did that. I have various books and some other short stories that I used in teaching as well. I've got a few worksheets on there that I used in class, so it's been tested as well. I also have an interest in various other things as well. So I write, for example, from a personal point of view, as I'm Muslim and a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings about Islam, I write FAQs about that. So far, it's about 82 questions, so 82 articles on that. And the latest one I have is a book that's actually been published through DIO Press in the US. So that one, they have academic books. So that was again suggested to me. That's where you come in, actually. When we were working together in Baha on a project, suggestion from our project manager, Dr. Anas, the late Dr. Anas. He was a very good friend and colleague. So he suggested to me, based on a road traffic accident that I had when I was younger, I was basically crossing the road when I was 6 years old. So a car hit me directly on my head and broke off a large portion of my skull. And that had many different side effects. So I published that through the publisher. And so far, what I'm aware of, I don't know how far it's been, but I've been told I received an email that is gone to the Bodleian Healthcare Library, which is part of the University of Oxford in the UK, and also at Karlstad University in Sweden. So I'm trying to get more people to read that. And also, I hope it will benefit them as well.
I recall our discussions about your experiences and about your books when we were in Baha, and it was very eye-opening. What was the major challenge in your life so far?
For a very long time, I don't know whether it's directly related to the accident or whether it was not. Well, obviously, the accident had a very big impact, just so you have a bit of background about it. I was 6 years old. I was dropped off opposite to my house in Kuwait, that was, at the time, expat family. So I'm from the UK, but I was living in Kuwait. My father was an architect. So I was left to cross the road by myself. I was only 6 years old. I didn't know how to do that. So I made it about halfway through, and the next thing I remembered was I was in the hospital. That was actually 3 weeks later. I was in a life support machine. And afterwards, there were many other things after that. So I had hemiparesis, for example. So I couldn't move my left arm. I couldn't walk. I lost my voice. So many other difficulties like that. There were other impacts as well. Later on, my personality, it seemed to be a bit different. I was no longer as lively as I used to be. And also, I was within myself a lot of the time due to various personal circumstances as well. And because of that, I was quite reserved. So that was quite a challenge, how to open up a bit more and how to move forwards. And a large part of that actually was when I started interacting more. So when I was in the UK, I started working within the community. I started working as an Arabic tutor. So I started teaching members of the community. That brought me into contact with other people, and especially when I worked as an interpreter. That one was a very big point in my life because it was an ad hoc basis on call out. So, for example, people would say they have a patient who suddenly come to a hospital and they don't speak any English. Can I help them out? Yeah. So I'd be on call out. I'd help them out. It was very insightful. I saw all sorts of patients from all different areas, and it was interesting seeing it in reverse. Yeah. So I had different experience as a patient in hospital, but I got to help other patients indirectly, interpreting for the doctors, nurses, many different types of medical professionals going to the hospital, many different clinics. Yeah, that was bringing me also more aware of other problems that people can face, helping me to realize that I'm not alone. And then the next big one after that, and this was a key turning point, of course, was moving to Saudi Arabia. Yeah? So I had to become more independent. Then I had to deal with different challenges by myself and also learn, like adapting to a different culture, interacting more with others, being much more independent. That was a big learning curve. It helped me to learn. So what I found was that sometimes rather than just getting lots of things, lots of material things, being independent was a great opportunity to learn and also much more fulfilling to move forward.
If you go back in time, would you do something different, or you would do the same?
Okay. It's an interesting question. Obviously, it was meant to be. It was destiny. It was meant to happen. Qadar, that I was to have the accident. But as we say, Alhamdulillah, on every situation. Thanks, praise to Allah for every situation. It could have been much worse, right? So, there are people who have been through far worse situations, and actually going through the interpreting process brought me into contact with many people who had been through much worse. Yeah. So many people, they have stroke, they have lifelong problems, they have blindness, many other things. But in that sense, that's why I titled my book "Hole in My Head: The Blessing of a Traumatic Brain Injury," because it helped me to realize. You see, all too often, we're as humans, it's natural, right? As you know, in Arabic, word for human is insan, the one who forgets, right? So all too often we forget our blessings. Like people, they have good health, but then they're not happy. They want cosmetic surgery. Or for example, somebody they're perfectly active, but then they start smoking. People, for example, they have a good family, they don't value them. Yeah. So in that sense, it was a blessing that I had that because then it made me think more about others, right? So that's why I'm a teacher, because having the accident, I could see how much help I personally received. So that's why I think more about how I could do that. That's why originally I wanted to work in the medical profession before I went into teaching, but still I can directly support people and help them. And that's why I'm trying to share the experience. Maybe somebody, they might have some benefit from reading somebody's experience, sharing that. When I was younger, I didn't have that opportunity because obviously there was no social media. That was back in 1988. They didn't have any social media, no internet. They didn't have the technology. So finding a support network definitely helps. If there was, again, coming back to the original question, if there was something later on that I could have done, I think it would have been to try and be a bit more independent, like maybe trying to move out, or maybe trying to do things a bit more early, trying to think about how I could manage by myself, like maybe how I could maybe think more about my career a bit earlier rather than going out a bit later in life. It was mostly after I got married that a lot of the changes afterwards. After that, then I managed to get my qualifications, and then I managed to move to Saudi Arabia, and then I was able to develop that further. But yeah, if I could do one thing, it would probably try and do that a bit earlier. Just I have noticed it is beneficial, and since writing the book, I have came into contact with other people who had head injuries as well. So it does help. There are people who share it, like certain charity organizations, and it's amazing how every case is so different. In fact, I was surprised that when I was discussing this, like with another colleague, I found out that he's in the same department as me. I work with him, but he actually had a head injury very similar to mine. When he was 7 years old in the UK, he was crossing the road and a car hit him. But what's interesting is that none of the side effects took place or affected him so much like me. So he ended up in hospital, spent the weekend there, and had to wear a neck brace. But that's it, nothing further. Nothing else happened to him. After the weekend finished, back on Monday, he was able to go back to school, play as normal like other children, no other issues. And then you have a big difference. So definitely, it does help sharing experience.
What would you advise, like the young generation that we're targeting by the Lighthouse show to do? Like, what would be the one single advice?
Very important, but can branch out into different areas, is not to give up, right? So regardless of how bad your situation is, there'll always be someone who's been in a worse situation. Yeah. So, even if, for example, like somebody, they obviously it's traumatic, right? You lose your arm or something like that. I hope this never happens to anyone. But, there are always people, like there's an Australian person, unfortunately, I can't remember his name, Nick something, but he's a motivational speaker. He was born with no arms and no legs. But his tagline is no arms, no legs, no worries. Yeah. There are people, for example, who are blind, but they've authored books. Yeah. It happens. I think Sheikh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, of Makkah, the Grand Mufti of Makkah, he was a blind person. Yeah? So, there are many different role models, but not to give up. There's always hope, but sometimes you have to look at different avenues. Like, how can you do it? A very famous one from the UK was Professor Stephen Hawking. Yeah, he was one of the greatest scientists of recent times. But if you look at him, like he needed a special machine just to speak. He couldn't speak at all. He was completely immobile. But he didn't let them stop him. He looked at different ways. How can he do it? Okay, he can't speak verbally, but he used a machine. So maybe there's a way around it, but you have to look at your options, see what options are around you, and yeah, keep going. Maybe make a network, but whatever it is, don't stop. Whatever you're doing.
I really advise them, like to heed your advice about like not stopping. They have to keep trying no matter how hard is life, because this is resilience. It's one of the major skills that everyone should have. Thank you very much, and good luck with all the nice books that you're authoring.